All right, welcome everybody. We're going to give it about 60 to 90 seconds for as many people to join as possible, and then we will go ahead and get started. Thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to give it about another 30, 45 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump in. We will formally introduce ourselves in a second, but good evening, and we just want to thank you so much for being here tonight. We know that your time as a parent is precious, and we really don't take lightly the fact that you showed up for your kids tonight. And to Jen and I, that really means everything. So tonight is called Forget the Rankings, and we mean that quite literally. So we're going to ask you before we get started tonight to kind of set aside a lot of what you see on the internet, maybe what you're seeing on the news and reading on the news, and maybe even what you hear people in your community and your neighbors tell you about the college search. Because Jen and I think that there's a better way to approach this.
Okay, so before we dive in, we have one simple question for you, and that is, in one word, describe your greatest hope for your child. Go ahead, take a moment. There's no wrong answers. We're just going to pause for a second or two. So typically when Jared and I ask this question, the words that people often share with us are kind, happy, fulfilled, and confident. So the words that we don't pop up on that don't often pop up for families are the names of the schools that students are applying to or attending, or maybe even the specific type of job that they might be interested in. But much of the college process can start to feel like those are the only things that matter. And tonight, we want to take a moment to reconnect with what actually does matter in this process.
So, who are we? We're are two people who have spent our entire careers working in high schools, both public and private and charter. We both are public high school counselors currently at a pretty large public high school in Pennsylvania. We're both also licensed therapists, so we do a lot of that socio-emotional work with kids, but also with parents. And Jen and I have sat with literally probably thousands of students at this point through the highs and lows and the hardest moments of the entire college search. And a few years ago, Jen popped into my office. I love to tell this story after a college meeting and just looked at me and said, like, there's got to be a better way. There's something broken here. And this stemmed from her and I just seeing so much anxiety in our students and honestly seeing it in parents too. And we realized it had like risen to this level that didn't really match reality. And Jen had this idea and said, like, what if there was a way that we could change this conversation? Um, and I looked at her and I said, great, let's do that. So we're going to share more about what this is, but together we founded what we call Forget the Rankings, the values-driven college search. It's something that all of you have access to through your school counseling office. And we are so excited to share it with you tonight. And I'm also very lucky I get to do this work with one of my best friends. That's why it says besties on there.
Okay. So you've seen these headlines, a confusing new world for college applicants, or the very real insanity of college admissions, or maybe it's college admissions, part in the decline of mental health in teens. These aren't fringe publications. We're seeing these in the New York Times, in Forbes, in New York Magazine. So the narrative around college admissions has become genuinely alarming. And that alarm, it's contagious. It spreads from the media to parents, to students, and suddenly a 16-year-old is lying awake at night wondering if their B plus on that AP US history exam just ruined their life. I say that with a smile, like I'm joking, but Jared and I can both attest that we've had these conversations in our offices and have been there as students, really do feel the pain from a test like that. So we're here tonight because we think the story being told is not the full story.
So I want to start and ground us here. And this is the first big myth that we want to take some time and bust tonight. And that's this idea that there's just not enough good, and I put that in air quotes, good colleges for everyone. It's this scarcity myth. And in reality, we can all agree that's a zero-sum game. That if your kid doesn't get into one of these top 20, top 50, top 100 sweatshirt schools, then they've lost some kind of game. But if we look at the data, that doesn't really support that, right? So again, we talk about what Jen just shared. All of these headlines often zero in on the same 20 to 50 schools, but data actually doesn't support that. Only about 4% of US college students will end up going to a college that accepts fewer than 25% of applicants. And I just want you to sit with that for a second. The schools that we see talked about 90% of time, social media, the news, and all of those places, only 4% of students will end up attending one of those schools. And then when you look at the top 50 most selective schools in the entire country, all of them combined, you put all of them together, and they enroll just 2 to 3% of American students, right? 2 to 3%. And then here's the flip side to that. Over 3/4, so the overwhelming majority of US colleges are accepting more than half of everyone who applies. The majority accepts the majority of applicants. So there isn't this scarcity of good schools. What we see is there's a scarcity of accurate information, and that's really what we're here to fix tonight, right? There's well over 4,200, I think 97 schools in the country. There are so many wonderful, fantastic places. We just don't talk about them all the time. And that's part of what we want to share with you tonight and kind of talk through.
Okay. So now let's talk about outcomes because this is where it gets really interesting. Economists Dale and Kruger did a famous study where they tracked students who got into elite schools but chose to attend less selective ones. Those students earned essentially the same income over their careers as peers who attended the elite institutions. So the prestige of the name of the diploma mattered far less than what the student did with their 4 years in college. And research on social mobility shows that mid-tier public universities often outperform elite schools. So I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. Research on social mobility shows that mid-tier public universities often outperform elite schools when it comes to actually lifting students into higher economic brackets. And the Gallup-Purdue Index found that things like meaningful faculty relationships, hands-on experiences, and genuine engagement were 3 to 4 times stronger predictors of career satisfaction than the name of the school. We often, when we share this with families, we'll get this question, well, what about business? What about business? So we're also here to share that only 9% of business leaders have said that college prestige is very important when they're hiring. Only 9%.
So before we go any further, we wanted to give a moment to hear directly from students. And some of you may have seen this. You might follow Challenge Success out of Stanford. It's this really wonderful project that is doing exactly what it says, challenging success, really thinking about what are the dominant narratives about success. And we just want you to hear these voices because I think these voices will really stay with you after this video. So we're going to give it a listen.
I wish my parents knew how long and tiring my days are.
I wish my teachers knew how stressed, tired, overworked, and depressed I am.
I wish my teachers knew I only sleep about 5 hours a night.
3 hours of sleep.
That I barely get any sleep.
I wish my parents knew how stressful
school is.
How stressed I get daily.
How much stress I'm under.
We are mad stressed.
Can't just turn my stress off.
That I'm barely surviving.
I wish my teachers knew their grades determine my worth.
I wish my teachers knew that I doubt myself so much that it drastically affects the quality of my work.
I wish my parents knew that I don't want to disappoint them.
How hard I'm working to get a good grade they aren't proud of.
I wish my parents knew I'm doing my best.
Always do my best.
That I'm trying my best.
I wish my parents knew I actually talk to people. Don't worry.
It's not the end of the world to miss a hockey practice.
That I'm kind of shy at school sometimes.
That studying and grades aren't everything.
I wish my parents knew sometimes I need to have a conversation, even though it looks like I am independent.
I wish my teachers knew that if I don't raise my hand, I don't know the answer.
I wish my teachers knew how much I like school.
That they are always role models to me.
How much they influence and inspire me.
I wish my parents knew how hard I want to make them happy and proud.
How much I love them.
I wish my parents knew the true extent of my gratitude for them.
I've heard that so many times, but it hits the same every time. This is the reality of what our teenagers are experiencing in schools. And the other lens that Jen and I bring to this that we didn't mention is we're both parents, right? And our children might be a little bit younger and have not entered high school yet, but we think about this all the time. And there you hear it straight from the students themselves. Life in high school, the way it's currently playing out, has become so much less about growth and joy and discovery. And we've seen it become about like checking boxes and trying to fit into someone else's definition of what success looks like. And you can hear it in the video. Our teens are tired, stressed, overwhelmed, hanging their hat on like my success is contingent upon grades where I go to college. And we are working to be another voice that helps them reclaim the joy in the post-secondary planning process.
Okay, so perfect segue into talking about the impact on mental health. And we do need to talk about it because the numbers surrounding it are very serious. According to the CDC, 42% of high school students reported feeling persistently sad or hopeless, and nearly a third reported poor mental health overall. 22% seriously considered suicide, and 10% attempted it. The U.S. Surgeon General himself has pointed to the college admissions process as a significant contributor, describing it as a system that students experience as being less about growth and more about fitting into a narrow definition of success. These are not small stakes. So we are not saying college admissions is the only cause, but we are saying it's a meaningful piece of the puzzle, and it's one that we can actually do something about.
So this quote is from Dr. Victor Schwartz, who is a chief medical officer of the JED Foundation, another organization you might be familiar with, who's doing a lot of work in teen mental health and how to protect the emotional health of teens. And I think he put it really well. And he's talking that the perception that getting into an elite college is the difference between success and failure, that has created this environment where there's no room for error. There's no room for a student to make a mistake. This is where we see students saying a B in 7th grade feels catastrophic. And think about what it does to a child if they're growing up believing that one grade, one test score, one rejection letter is defining who they are as a person. And I think oftentimes our society kind of dresses that up as ambition, and we can all agree that's not ambition, that's anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another quote right here from Lloyd Thacker that Jared and I come back to again and again. And he's the author of College Unranked. And he wrote, like I said, something that we come back to again and again. It's really grounded us in this process. And he's gone on to say that the admissions landscape is characterized by fear, anxiety, myth, secrecy, and educational irrationality. And that very few voices have stepped up to put the brakes on what we call this runaway train. So that's exactly what we're here to do tonight. We're here to put the brakes on this runaway train. Not to tell you that college doesn't matter. It does. Not to tell you that hard work doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But instead to say that the story that you've been told, that we've all been told about what makes a college experience successful, it needs a rewrite.
So this is where the presentation takes a turn. We're going to talk about the joy. So what if this whole thing could look different? What if there was a way that the college search was actually joyful, right? So many families we work with are approaching this thinking that this is like a gauntlet that their family has to survive. We really look at this as what if it became one of the most meaningful conversations you've ever had with your teenager? And that's what we're going to explore for the rest of tonight.
Okay, what message do we want to send? So David Brooks, he wrote a piece in the New York Times where he asked this really pointed question. What message does our current system send to kids? And he went on to make this observation that we could have built an admissions process that celebrated creativity or resilience or passion, but instead we built one that rewards kids who are good at being perfect across every dimension, but particularly in academics. And that leaves the winners even burnout and depressed. So he called the college admissions process one of the truly most destructive institutions in American society. Strong words, but the data backs it up. So the question we want to put to you tonight is what message do you want to send to your children about their worth, about their future, and about what success looks like?
So, one of our favorite sayings, we have posters that say this, is that students are worth so much more than a college acceptance letter, right? And when students begin to kind of equate their acceptance letter with their inherent worth, this idea of like getting into a prestigious school becomes the same thing as being a good, valuable, worthy person. That's when we have a serious problem. And I think we can all agree that that belief system is flawed and that there's very, very real consequences to that, right? It's narrowing our students as they're developing. It's narrowing how they see themselves. We've seen the data. It's intensifying mental health struggles during the process. And it's often leaving students feeling kind of directionless after graduation when they start to discover that a prestigious degree doesn't automatically guarantee the fulfillment that they were promised. Jen and I have seen it. We've seen students go and choose out of all of the schools they were accepted to, the highest ranked, and not be happy, right? And what is it that fuels that? It's this like perfect storm of anxiety, this misinformation machine, and a culture that is ranking institutions instead of focusing on student fit and well-being. And this is a really important space that we pause and Jen and I make a disclaimer. We are not anti-Ivy League. We are not anti-top 20, top 50, top 100 school. We're anti-choosing it for that reason. And we will share an example. There is a very popular Ivy League university in our backyard. And what we often find is that it is the end all be all for our students. And so many times when we ask students why that school, we get back, it's a good school. Well, we push in what makes it good. And I will tell you, more than half of the time, students really struggle to come up with an answer of why. So again, if the school that ends up being the best fit for you, that connects with your values, which we're going to discuss in a second, happens to be highly ranked, an Ivy, hyper selective, that's fine as long as we are coaching and teaching students that they should be making those decisions connected with who they are, right? Not what they achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so our vision at Forget the Rankings, it's pretty simple. We want every student to have access to find a college where they truly belong, where they can thrive, where they can grow and make a meaningful impact on the world. Not the college with the best US News ranking that shouldn't be their guiding light, but the college that's actually right for them. We believe that starts with values, not rankings, but instead personal values.
All right. So, what is this thing that we've been talking to you about all night? One of the things that Jen and I realized as we have these conversations with students is there are other people out there who are singing the same song, right? We've met other counselors, we've met other people in this space, we've talked to VPs of admissions at colleges, even highly selective universities, who are like, yes, student wellness, that's so, so important. But what we found is it's one thing to talk about it. No one had created a tool to navigate these conversations and help connect students to schools that could be a good fit in this way. So what exactly is this thing that we keep talking about, Forget the Rankings, and how does it work? What it starts with is something that's very intentionally tactile, not tech-driven, not an app. It's a tactile values card sorting activity that the counselors in your schools have. So if you're having a college meeting, if your student is meeting with them, they have these physical cards. And you may have done a values card sort before in your life, maybe for fun, maybe in a therapeutic setting. We use them in career counseling a lot too. And the idea is it's in two parts. And we'll show you in a second. Part one are conversations that you've probably had. What are the criteria that are important to my student and my family? Maybe it's size, distance from home, majors, internship, opportunities. Maybe it's athletics, right? The kind of things that if you're using SCORE or Naviance or College Board Big Futures, you're having those conversations. Part two is where it's really different, is where we have created a list of about 26 values that students and families are sorting through to identify what really matters to them in life. This transcends college, but also has application for what matters to them in a college experience, right? So these values are different things. This could be collaboration or global citizenship or great food. It could be something like activism, or it could be beauty, or it could be creativity, right? We want students and families to think through what genuinely matters to them, not what they think they're supposed to care about. The way that we do this in our meetings is we have two decks of cards. We give one to the student, we give one to the family, the trusting adult, whoever's there with them to talk about college. And we have them sort silently, but in tandem at the same time. And then we ask the student to share first. What were your top criteria? What were your top values? And then we ask again, parent, guardian, trusted adult to do the same. I know I'm speaking for both Jen and I, but we've talked about this endlessly. My favorite college meetings have been the ones where we get to do this because we're watching families come in so eager to talk about testing and deadlines and lists of schools. And we're like, whoa, let's take a huge step back. Let's sort some cards and talk about who your kid is. And we've had so much feedback from parents saying, like, you have no idea what a gift it is to sit down with your 16, 17, 18-year-old and potentially learn something new about them and to reframe this entire conversation. The really cool thing from there is there's two entry points, and we're going to show you the website in a second. The back of every card has a QR code, and we've created these collections of colleges that are driven by value. So there are these curated schools and profiles that match that value. Recognizing that not all schools allow phones, we're one of those schools, right? So there is also a desktop version that students can access from a laptop. These are not ranked lists at all, and all of this is supported by this community of resources that we've created that's really talking about this values-driven approach. So we've talked a lot about it. Now we want to show you what it looks like. And again, this will be something that you will have the opportunity to click through, create an account, look through in addition to your school having the cards. So let me do a little click here and take you to our website. So for all of those who are on, when you come, there'll be a button here to log in or create an account. Your school community has a unique join code that they'll be able to share with you so that you can make that account and that you would be able to log in. So you jump there. I'm going to log in really quickly here. And we're going to give you a little tour to show you what it is that we've built. So this is the landing page. This is what you'll come to. So again, instructions to how to complete the card sort. So this is great for the counselors on your team to look at, but also for families to get an idea. And then we're going to show you kind of the heart of all of this, and that's called the list of colleges by value. So when you click here, you'll see all of these are our values cards that you would have physically sorted with your student, and each of those lead to a list, right? So for fun, maybe we click on adventure, colleges that value adventure. It then takes you to a landing page of every list has about 15 schools that we believe really value this idea of adventure, right? And we always get the question, well, how do you make decisions about who belongs on that list? There's a couple of things that I think are really important to point out. No schools are paying us to join our lists. No schools are reaching out to saying, hey, add us here. This is where we want to be. This is built from collectively 30 plus years in this field. I've also worked in college admissions. This is built by, at this point, I think, Jen, it's safe to say like thousands of hours of research that we've done. We've been on so many college tours ourselves, and we've looked for three things for a school to make the list. First is there's a strong demonstration of that value somewhere in academics. That might mean there's a full major, there's a minor, there's a certificate program, there's a course that we believe is connected to that. Two is student clubs and activities. There are typically more than one student club or activity that we believe champions this value as well. And the third is what we call like general campus culture and climate. What are those big campus-wide traditions, community traditions? How is this school showing that this is really, really important to them? So then this is one entry point that students can use to kind of figure out, if a school connects with them. So for example, let's click Evergreen State. It's a favorite of Jen and I's in Washington. So what you'll see is the first thing is there's a write-up. We've pulled those examples from those 3 areas we've talked about, and we've written these just pretty powerful, this is what adventure at Evergreen State looks like. And for here, you can see it's this very unique educational environment with a lot of outdoor learning and outdoor leadership and all of these other things. Every school has a link to their homepage, and also a link to that value in action. So this is typically in a student newspaper or magazine or on their website. It's truly how are people at Evergreen State living adventure, and it gives you a very, very specific example. Then we talked about those white cards, right? Those criteria cards, those come back, and we've indexed all of the information about the school. So you might be a family who said, like, campus setting is really important to us. We really want to be in the suburbs. You can click here and get a quick descriptor of, is this a school in the suburbs? We then directly link to athletic pages, online campus tour, the net price calculator. Distance from home is really cool. You click it, it pulls up Google Maps, you put in your home address, you see how far. A list of majors, safety on campus, research opportunities, size of student body. And again, we take you directly to the school to get the most accurate and updated information. We even have the current weather. So you click that and it takes you exactly to that zip code and kind of see what that is. So that's one entry point that we talk about. We also recognize that many families are coming into this process and they're a little bit maybe further along with the criteria. They don't want to just look through lists of schools and be like, well, maybe we read about Evergreen State and say like, Washington's too far. We're not going to end up going to a school like that. We've also built a search engine as well. So the way that this functions is much like other search engines. Keywords, you could type in a major. So maybe your student is thinking engineering. Maybe you have some locations in mind. Maybe your student wants to stay in the South. Maybe you have specific states. You can put campus setting. You can even put in size, right? And then you can even sort it by selectivity rate. And then you can go in and you can pick, click off those values. So maybe your student said fun, global citizenship, leadership, courage, curiosity, diversity. And again, the more information that you put in, the longer these lists will be. But then what it does is it indexes all of the schools that meet all of your criteria. So we know that any school that appears below is on one of your values lists, and it meets this other criteria like size, location, selectivity, all of those things. And then all you have to do is simply click, and it will take you in there as well. So 2 different entry points to be able to look through our lists of schools. But that's not it. We have a lot of other cool things. 3 that I really want to show you so that when you have time to be able to go and explore this, you know where to go. We also recognize that not every student will be looking at a 4-year college as their path after high school. And we want to normalize that and help students feel seen and loved if that is their path, right? So there are also card decks that your counselors have that we call Pathways Forward. So if you're sitting here or you know someone who says like, my student, it's not going to be a 4-year school, we've created a very similar platform. We've expanded the list of values and even added some. So still a card sorting activity. And then what we have done is indexed a bunch of different things. Direct to workforce jobs that we believe connect to that value. An example of trade and technical programs, certificate programs, and also associate's degree programs. The coolest thing about the direct to workforce jobs is they're all only requiring a high school degree. You click, check out some job listings here. We've indexed it to go directly to Indeed. And you could put in Dripping Springs, Texas, and do a search, and it's going to pull up a list of jobs in that area for a student. A few other things that we really love about this when you get to the bottom, we've also created really great guides and workbooks and rooted in each value. So again, maybe your student does this and they're not thinking college and they say, feeling good, that wellness is really important to me. We've created these PDFs that you could print. It gives those lists of jobs and pathways. It gives some small action steps that you could take as a family to move towards that path. And then all of these are fillable. So your student could be doing some reflecting. You could talk as a family, what does feeling good mean to you? And a great thing to kind of fill out and think through what this might look like for you. So we've tried to think of it all. This is about all pathways post high school, not just college. And then if your student is doing pathways forward, but they are also interested in school, at the bottom of each list, we've also linked it back to our list of colleges. So you can see here advocacy at the very bottom. Maybe your student wants to look at our colleges that value activism. I'm going to show you two more quick things, and then Jen, you'll tell me if there's anything I'm forgetting that you want to make sure that we show as
No,
well.
but before
Yeah,
you leave Pathways Forward,
yeah,
just so everybody knows, your counselors also have this also has a card deck associated with it, and the counselors have that as well.
great.
Don't think I heard you say that. Sorry if I missed it.
No, and then we have a really great just student resource library for students and families. So we have a great workbook that walks through this entire kind of values-driven process. We've recognized that some students are like, I've never really talked about core values. I don't know how to start that conversation. A great workbook to complete as a family, great like dinner table conversations to start to do some of that like pre-work before you do the card sort. We have all kinds of student handouts, and I'm going to let Jen talk about her favorite. She put in a lot of work
Yeah.
in this. It's under admissions
Oh,
prep and planning, right?
it is, and it's the
Yep,
first one right there.
yep.
So if we intentionally built this database to not be totally comprehensive because those databases exist and we wanted this to be more manageable for students and families. So we fully recognize that there's schools that exist that aren't on our list, but it doesn't mean that they don't have values associated with them. And it doesn't mean that a school that we might have under environmentalism can't also be under another list as well. So Jared and I created these lists of questions for students to peruse and think about. So pretend, let's go, which one did you pick? Okay, so
Curiosity.
pretend you picked curiosity. Here would be 2 pages worth of questions aimed at determining whether a college valued curiosity on campus. So what I'll often say to the students that I'm working with is like, take your top 5-ish values, pull up these questions to ask about, insert personal value there, and either use them or merge them together, whatever feels best for you, to be like a framework, a guide to determine if other schools not on our list or schools that are on our list but maybe not in the innovation category in this case, do they meet what you're looking for? We find this to be a really helpful and healthy way to approach the college search in determining if it's the right spot for your kid.
This also like doing the card sort is not just for like building a list, right? We have seniors who have never done it who come in and are deciding between a few schools, and we do the card sort and then pull these questions and say, you're between 3 schools. These are your 3 top values. Go do some research, ask these questions, talk to admissions. If you're going to an open house or an admitted student stay, use these to kind of see, is this aligning with who you are? And it's just a really great way to help students kind of think and make those connections. The other thing too, and Jen had referenced, we're not going to ever index every single school out there. We are starting to cross list schools because again, schools could be in many categories, but we find some that are really strongly demonstrating 2 or more values. So you might see them appear on 2 lists. Our goal is not to put thousands of colleges here. It's really to kind of champion some of the unsung heroes, the hidden gems, although you will still find selective schools, you will still find some big name schools as well, but we're trying to expose people to schools that maybe they haven't always thought of or heard of. And then one other quick thing, we also have a scholarship search. So again, you might have a student who they already know where they want to go, but they're starting to think of like, how could I find scholarships that align with who I am? Same thing. You could do the values sorts and then you could click, and then all of these are linkable and it gives you the amount. And all of these are scholarships that might be great for a student who considers themselves to be a global citizen. So again, a lot of uses for the card sort. I think that this is really helpful language for a teen to develop, even if, again, they already have a list of schools. We've also found that we've had some families come in and they're like, we already have a list. And we're like, great, we'd still love to do this because this can help them round out that list. It can help them find a couple of options that we hate the word safety school. We call them comfort schools because we want students to find schools that they are likely to be admitted to, but that they would also love. And we find that using this, students are able to find that blend of a school that they are likely to be admitted to, but they feel connected to the campus because of that. All right, so that's a pretty quick walkthrough of the website. We're going to talk through a little bit more about this and then some tips, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end.
Okay. So why does starting with values matter so much? And for me and Jared, there's a few reasons. First, and I think really importantly, it shifts the focus from external validation, which is what we heard at the beginning. A lot of the chase students have around academics and performance, like that's external validation. So to a genuine self-discovery, right? So it asks students to slow down and to actually think about who they are and what they want, rather than just what looks good on a list or what's going to look good to their peers, right? And that shift alone, it reduces anxiety. When students feel like the process is about discovering themselves rather than proving themselves, everything changes. It expands their sense of what's possible. So a student who has had tunnel vision on like the five air quotes name brand schools and suddenly sees a much richer landscape of places where they could genuinely flourish, it helps build skills that they'll be able to use for the rest of their lives and really like how to make decisions based on what matters to them. As Jared mentioned at the beginning, we're also both licensed therapists, and I think in our practices we've both seen so many folks who struggle with career and what jobs they've gone into, and it's because they haven't looked at like the trajectory of their lives and how they want to spend their times from a values driven approach. It's been from an external validation approach. So starting this process earlier helps students in the long run.
All right, so this next part, we're going to turn to some like strategies, tips, and tricks. This is for the grown-ups in the room, and something that we all have to acknowledge is that we all carry our own baggage when it comes to this process. And I want to recognize that's completely human. But if we don't take a moment as a parent to kind of like open up and look what's inside of our bags, what we're doing is we risk transferring whatever that weight is onto our kids without even realizing it, right? So doing some mindful work, we say it's time to claim our own baggage. So we want to offer you just a couple of questions to sit with. And again, I'm not saying we really want you to sit with them, not just answer it quickly and move on. So the first thing we always encourage families to think through and talk about for parents is like, what are your own unresolved educational regrets, right? What are the disappointments from your own education that you might be trying to heal through your child's journey? That's a really big one, and sometimes uncomfortable to sit with and think about. The second is about social status. So how much of your interest in these kind of name brand schools is genuinely about your teen's future? And how much of it is about your social circle, your neighborhood, conversations at the office, right? So often we see that parents feel like where my kid ends up is a marker of my success as a parent, right? And I'm sure if you talk to neighbors and other people, these are the conversations that come up when you have a teenager in high school. So really thinking about like, where does that interest really stem from? Next is, how have you defined success in your own life? What does that mean? And are you imposing that definition on your teenager? Something to think about. And then what about fear-based thinking, right? So like, are there anxieties about your child's future that you're projecting onto their college choice? Are you asking them to choose a school that will make you feel less afraid rather than one that's truly right for them? I acknowledge that these are really hard questions, and none of them are written to make you feel guilty. They're just meant to help you think before you enter this space with your child, and so you can show up with them or for them in the best way possible.
Okay, so we're going to get really practical now and start talking about some concrete things that you can start doing tonight. All right, one of the most powerful shifts that you can make is replacing judgment with curiosity. So what I mean by that, instead of saying, oh, that's not a good school, you could say instead, what programs interest you at that college? It's a small change in language, but it communicates something enormous. It's that you trust your teenager's instincts and that you're curious about why they're interested somewhere. It's showing your teens how to practice decatastrophizing. And when you catch yourself thinking, if they don't get into that top school, they'll struggle forever. This is a chance for you to pause, to ask for the evidence, because the evidence, as we've shared earlier tonight, it just isn't there. So if you can consider creating what we call a college-free agreement with your teenager. And what I mean by this is a specific time or activities where college doesn't come up. It could be dinner on Tuesdays or Saturday mornings, whatever works for your family. Your relationship, it needs space to breathe, and this is going to allow that to happen. In this time, well, not in this time because this is your college free time, but in another time, you can share your own stories of rejection or, redirection and how those moments ultimately led somewhere good. And you get this chance to model what healthy failure response looks like. And finally, watch your pronouns. So, what we mean by that is actually track this one. When you say we're applying, switch that to you're applying. It's a signal that's worth noticing, and it's telling your teenager that this is their journey, and let's let it belong to them. I had a family many, many years ago that shared with me something that they were doing that I have passed along this piece of advice to most families that I've worked with, and it's in line with what Jared and I are saying right now. The student actually made a joke in a meeting with me and said, it's like every time my mom gets on the highway and we're going 65 miles per hour and she locks the doors, that's like when she loves to bring up college, and I'm never ready for it. So we had a good like laugh over this, right? But the family turned and said, like, what we do now is we schedule it. So you can schedule the college free time, but you can also schedule the college chat. And you can say to your teenager, hey, Thursday nights after dinner, we're just going to do a check-in and we're not going to bother you about it during the rest of the week. And this way, your student knows on Thursdays there's going to be this expectation or whatever night you pick that they want to catch up on where your student is in the process, their process, not your process, right? And it allows them like that opportunity to come prepared and not be caught off guard or in the midst of studying for whatever exam might be headed their way.
So a couple of other things. We think it's really important to think about how you create an emotionally safe space, right? And your child needs to know without any ambiguity that your love and approval are not on the line here, right? You're not going to be disappointed in them as a person if they get rejected from a school. So really working to separate your love from their academic outcomes is one of the most protective things you can do for their mental health. The next is give them explicit permission to explore every option, whether that be a gap year, a trade school, community college, or paths that don't even involve a four-year degree. We also say that in terms of like what they do in their summer. Let innate curiosity and the desire to explore guide them. One of the things that you'll always hear Jen and I say, we have a great banner in our office that says authentic choices don't need validation. So when students come to me and say, Mr. Epler, do you think it's a good idea if I do XYZ this summer? Do you think that would look good to a college? I always say, you're asking the wrong question. Would you be excited about doing that? And they're like, I'd be so excited. That sounds so authentic to you. Authentic choices don't need validation. So just getting your support to explore is really, really important. The next is just thinking about scheduling and help them build a balanced schedule that includes real rest, sleep, and recovery, right? That's so important. Real rest, sleep, and recovery. We know that this kind of admissions arms race is pushing kids towards like, it's about doing more, 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 more. And somebody has to be there to pump their brakes. And that somebody is you. The other thing is talk about rejection before it happens. Rehearse it together. What are you going to say when that happens? How are you going to support them? What are they going to need? I think it's so much better in advance to say, I think I might need this in the moment. I've done things with students where we have a code word. And if they come in and say a word, it means they didn't get into their school and we're not going to talk about it, right? So kids who have already had that conversation with the parent handle rejection way better than those who haven't. And then also just celebrate their authenticity. When they make a choice based on their genuine interest rather than a resume building thing, that is the win. That is the thing that is worth celebrating.
Okay. So I think it's very fair to say that stress during this process is normal. It's a really big life transition. And our goal here, it's not to eliminate stress, but it's to help your teenager develop the emotional tools to move through it and hopefully even enjoy the process to a certain extent, right? So we want to help them build emotional vocabulary beyond just the word stress. And some things you can dig into there as their parent is, can you name whether you're feeling hopeful or disappointed, overwhelmed or scared? The more specific they can be to name what's going on for them, the more manageable it becomes. And like Jared started to say, when setbacks happen, and they will, right, help broaden the time horizon. So we'll often say, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Or is this moment going to matter in 10 minutes, 10 months, or 10 years? The disappointment of this moment almost always looks smaller from that vantage point. Jared and I are big believers in gratitude, and we talk about this all the time. So, developing a shared gratitude practice, like even something simple at the dinner table, it's a genuine antidote to the scarcity mindset and the admissions culture that it promotes. We recommend you try it. Think about modeling what we call both end thinking. So I'm disappointed about what happened, but I'm curious to find out what comes next. It doesn't have to be either or, right? Both emotions can exist at the same time. And teaching your teenager that it's a gift that's going to go way beyond college.
I think that way beyond college piece is really important too. What Jen and I have built in kind of this framework and that we're doing is to really help students think about like long-term decision making and building the skills to be like happy, healthy human beings. So we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and we really genuinely hope that some of it lands in a really useful way. Again, not just for the college search, but for your relationship with your teenager during what is like one of the most formative stretches of their lives, and recognize that the work doesn't end here. Again, there's a ton of resources. There's our website. There's a growing community of families who are doing this differently. You'll see we have a bunch of different social channels and contact info on this screen. You're always free to give us a follow or reach out. But we are going to open it up for questions now. And I do see that there's a few. We'll use the Q&A feature. So the unique join code, I think there's a chat. We can actually put the unique join code in the chat for your school. I'm going to go ahead and type that in. It's in the, and hopefully, oh wait, that might just be hosts and panelists. Let me try this again.
And I'll say, as Jared works on that, just make sure that you also put, that you're part of Dripping Springs High School, because that way we'll know, where you're joining us from.
Yep. So I just put in that code. It's capital FTG, lowercase e, 410, lowercase y. And again, your school will have access to this. They have information to be able to share that with you too. So again, we'll use the Q&A feature. We have a few minutes if people want to drop some questions in the chat. I do see a question here. Do you include religious schools? We absolutely do. We include a wide depth and breadth of all different types of schools. So you'll find that those are available there. We actually also have an entire list dedicated to spirituality. And you'll find quite a few religious schools on that list too, of many different religions. So if that's something of interest to you and your student, I would highly recommend checking out that spirituality list. I think we answered this one, but again, our research, and again, a lot of it is personal experience too, having students gone to the schools, we're looking at those three pretty key elements. How is this value demonstrated in academics, coursework, majors, minors, certificate programs? How is it available to students through student clubs and activities? And how is it a big integral part of general campus culture and the vibe on campus? And again, we're looking for strong demonstrated interest among all three of those for a school to be able to make our list. And again, schools are not paying to join a list. They're not coming to us and saying, we belong on this list, put us on it. We're not doing any of that. This is no pay to play kind of scenario. This is, again, Jen and I have done a lot of tours. We've sent probably, again, thousands of students to so many schools at this point in our career as public school counselors. And we're using a lot of that to guide us, as well as just, again, thousands of hours of research. And again, the lists are always growing and expanding. So we're definitely adding to them. So you may go back in a few weeks and see more, usually over the summers when we do a lot of that work of adding or cross-listing schools. That looks like everything in the chat so far. So maybe we give it another minute or two before we wrap up to see if there's any other questions. Oh, I love this question. This is, if we are interested in a school not on the list, but we feel like it would fit, should we ask? We always love suggestions from people living this process, right? So like it'd be different to be like, I work for so-and-so school and we should be here. But if you're a parent who discovers a place that's so aligned with one of your kids' core values, please email us. There's actually also in the member section, a place to share your own values-driven story. So maybe you do this and maybe you use Jen's wonderful question downloads and you find another school, but you know it aligns with one of those values. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to learn about your story and love to consider adding it as well. That was such a good question. I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
Any others before we wrap up? The other thing is this was recorded. So again, this will be available through your school counseling office. And our ask is